Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to a brand new edition of Duke Mod Madness. I feel like it's been a hot minute since I've delved into the gargantuan pile of content that's available for dear old Duke Nukem 3D, and I feel like, in the grand scope of things, when it comes to Star Trek, it's a subject that's relatively underserved when it comes to custom mods. Enter Borg Nukem TC. As you might rightly suspect, this is a total conversion featuring the seemingly eternal enemy of Starfleet and, quite frankly, all sentient life in the universe, the Borg, a cybernetic race that seeks to assimilate all life it comes across and subsume it into its weird, cold, metallic, collective consciousness. I mean, all you really need to know here is Borg bad, Starfleet good, pick up your nearest phaser, get blasting. Visually, this mod does a pretty good job when it comes to recreating those recognizable starship interiors of Star Trek, which is fairly surprising considering the age of this mod. It's no spring chicken, hailing from the year 2005, and also including a fairly decent smattering of enemy sprites, some recognizable Borg, and a few repurposed Duke 3D sprites to fill out the enemy roster. Also porno mags, because being in Starfleet does not preclude you from being horny as all heck.
You are fully functional, aren't you?
Of course, but
How fully?
in every way, of course. I am programmed in multiple techniques.
When it comes to the armaments of Borg Nukem, you may be expecting a fair degree of pew-pew laser-based weaponry, but regrettably, I'm here to inform you that that is not the case. The first weapon that you actually acquire here is allegedly the phaser rifle, but there's not much phaser-like about it. Instead, it's really just a sprite swap that puts a fresh coat of paint over the traditional Duke 3D shotgun. And let's face it, it's just plain weird to have to cock a phaser rifle. That's not how phasers work. That's not how any of this works. Oddly enough, it actually takes you reaching the second level here in Borg Nukem before you acquire the bog standard primary phaser weapon. And yes, as you've probably guessed, its function is pretty much indistinguishable from that of the regular old Duke 3D pistol. It's disappointing, I'm not gonna lie, and this trend continues throughout the vast majority of the weapon roster here. And just to ram that particular point home, the turret cannon is obviously the chain gun cannon. This thing's just a friggin' pipe bomb, but round. The very fancy sounding isomagnetic disintegrator is an RPG with a flame trail. The Devastator swap honestly cracks me up a little though, because remember how the hand phaser is basically the pistol? Well, now you've got two of them, and they apparently melt faces. Curiously, the most interesting weapon here is something that is actually quite difficult to attain during the campaign, because I managed just to completely miss it, and had to go find it in the multiplayer map that's included in this mod, and this is it. It's a weird alien thingy that shoots green orbs, and sounds kind of goopy when you hit fire. Fun. Speaking of fun, it's unfortunately very difficult to come by during the course of Borg Nukem, and that reality sets in reasonably quick. The first few levels should be all you need to know when it comes to the quality of the actual level design itself. I'm serious, signs that things were going to go downhill fairly quickly during the playthrough of this mod were apparent right from the get-go. This situation in the very first level presenting me with a laser grid that you'd assume you need to find a button or a creative workaround for. But no, you just walk through it, you tank the damage, it's fine. Don't pay any further thought to it than that, honestly, it's a waste of good brain cells. And this kind of logical inconsistency plagues Borg Nukem for practically the entire duration. Oh, and buttons. Don't get me started on buttons. This mod has a colossal raging hard-on for buttons. Chances are, if you need to do something that's on one side of the level, you're gonna have to traverse to the opposite side and press a button in order to activate it. Will it tell you what the button has done? Heck no. You're just gonna have to figure that out on your own. Good luck. Sometimes you'll require multiple buttons. Why? No reason. They just felt like putting some extra buttons in there. Sometimes you'll find a button on the floor. This occurs multiple times. Why? No reason. Screw you. And quite frankly, after a while, it broke me. I just completely lost it, and I could no longer comprehend the reasoning that went into the making of certain sections of this goddamn mod.
Captain?
If I'm going to be honest, it never gets any less confusing. Just when you think it's reached the peak of confounding design decisions, it throws another fresh curveball into the mix. One section that particularly sticks in the mind is this corridor here full of locked doors, save for one, which leads you into a teleporter room. Only the dimensions of the room don't actually make sense in reference to the corridor you've just entered from. Where do the other doors go? Apparently, nowhere. They serve no purpose. They are cosmetic doors. And good luck if you decide to enter this room, by the way, because I couldn't figure a good way out of it once I got stuck in here. The door locked behind me, the teleporter pad didn't teleport me anywhere, and after copious amounts of wall humping, I could not find a switch that would actually let me out. So I no-clipped. I got back out into the corridor, and as it turns out, that entire room was completely unnecessary, superfluous to the progression of the level itself, because there was actually another switch just around the little corner here that lets you get through the rest of the corridor. Just why? Why? It's aberrations in design such as this throughout the course of Borg Nukem that just cause me to stop dead for several minutes at a time, just staring into the middle distance as my brain reboots in some vain effort to understand the reasoning process that led the author to put this down and think, ultimately, that this is fine. You know what I'm here to tell you, though? It's not fine. None of this is fine. I played through all of this, and I can definitively say that by the time I got to the end of it, and I killed the Borg Queen, it was not fine. And you know what really capitalizes that sentiment? The simple fact that killing the Borg Queen is not the end of Borg Nukem. No, it's just the end of the first episode. No! No! To its credit, episode 2 of Borg Nukem does have a touch more coherency to its levels, but even then, that's not saying much. The first level of episode 2 itself features its own fair share of ever so slightly wonky implementations. One such example can be found shortly after entering this parking structure here, where progression dictates that you should probably blow a hole in the vent in the wall. It's kind of subtle. Only on consultation with my minimap did I figure this was probably the way to go, and you can just straight phase through it. You don't actually need to blow it up to progress, but if you want to get back out, you will probably have to make it whole sooner rather than later. Mercifully, the rest of the map is strangely straightforward. Switches are relatively close to what they actually operate, keycards are clearly defined, and best of all, it's short. I didn't spend anywhere near as much time just scratching my head and getting utterly lost and confused by the structure of the level itself, so good job. Thumbs up. Somewhat amusingly, the start of the next map has you teleported into a bathroom to start things off. Always wondered about the bathrooms on starships. It's reassuring to know that in the future, people still need to poop. What's slightly less reassuring is where the poop actually goes. Does it get recycled? Is that what fuels the replicators? Now you see, right here, this is the problem. This is why nothing works. Someone replaced your warp core with a large spinning cylinder. As for the map itself, it just feels like an improvement on that opening map from episode 1, where some actual thought was put into the structure of the starship interior itself, having you fight from lower decks through engineering and ultimately up to the bridge here. It's much more interesting, much more coherent, and somewhat confirms my suspicion that episode 1 was very much a dry run. An example of an author trying to figure out how exactly to put all of these pieces together, whereas episode 2 is using that experience to a much more refined result. Shame about the furniture though. Starfleet ever heard of lumbar support? Somewhat bewilderingly, entering the ready room will teleport you to the next level, which is this random-ass starbase. You'll find that this is a common feature of Borg Nukem. Some of the levels kinda link together, but for the most part, there's not a lot of coherent progression from one to the next. It's just, here's a new level now. Don't ask how you got here, just get on with it. As for the level itself, much like the others in this episode, it is mercifully straightforward. This one feels much more of a slugfest than most. Corridors just lining up those enemies for you to knock down. Much more enforcers present here than most, and one thing you're going to have to watch out for when dealing with them is the fact that they deal a colossal amount of flinch to you whenever you get caught in their crosshairs. Pretty damn irritating. Oh, and while I'm at it, pro tip, don't try and go out the door that you started the level from. It will kill you. Thanks, build engine. The next map is apparently named Old Starbase, and is notable for the sole fact that it was so unmemorable that I completely flat out forgot I even played it. Next. Intruding is a map that begins in an odd fashion. You wake up in a vent, completely stripped of your weapons, which leads me to assume that this particular Starfleet officer likes to get blackout drunk and then just randomly press buttons in the transporter room. It's not long, however, before you do acquire yourself the standard issue phaser rifle. It's totally not just a shotgun. And after that, it's back to business, shooting things that are vaguely Borg adjacent, dealing with these adorably derpy turrets on top of the shuttle, and honestly, I'd say that's it. That's the most interesting feature of this level, the derpy turrets. Everything else, dull as absolute hell. There's not really much here other than the same shit you've been doing for the last several levels or so. And I mean, sure, I appreciate brevity, but the shortness of the maps here don't really make up for the lack of personality. At least you can say the episode 1 levels are completely bug nuts insane in terms of their construction, in terms of their logical consistency. That is enough to keep you occupied, but it's just a shame that this is the choice you have to make: a descent into abject madness or mild boredom. Get Out is the final map in this episode. I know, right? It just happens. All of a sudden, there you go, final map. And the title is kind of prophetic when it comes to figuring out what door you actually need to go through in order to leave this opening room, because, yeah, there's not a lot of clues here. You just have to headbutt them till you find the one that works. Also, tiny Borg cube. Look at it. Look at it spinning there. In a dinky. As for the map itself, you would be entirely forgiven for not realizing that this is the final map of the episode, because absolutely nothing about it screams urgency or escalation or, well, much of anything, really. Heck, even the soundtrack that's playing during this map is quite possibly one of the most languid and laid-back tracks in the entire episode. In terms of most interesting attribute, I'd say that it reminded me that Starfleet Officer Duke was a thing. This is practically your player's sprite, but you'll see them as NPCs during a very occasional smattering of levels here in Borg Nukem, and they don't really do a heck of a lot of much. They don't follow you, they're usually rooted to the spot, they will attack anything that comes near them in terms of enemies, and if you do have low health, they can teleport out and teleport some health back in, which is nice. It's just the implementation is just threadbare. As for the progression of this final level, it is quite possibly one of the most linear and straightforward of the bunch, and they're already pretty straightforward, but this is quite literally a linear collection of rooms. I dare even say it's quite lazy in design. I mean, this keycard, by the way, this is a brand new implementation for this level and this level alone. I wouldn't even known that that was a keycard if I didn't feel like sniffing around and discovering what it actually was, but honestly, it's the only thing that interests me in this map because of just how utterly pointless it turns out to be. You take it from here to there. Why? Why even bother? Seriously, a 3-button combination lock would have been more engaging than that. But anyway, I digress. You're probably chomping at the bit right now to discover how this roller coaster ride of an episode ends. I mean, the last one ended with a boss confrontation against the Borg Queen. How could this possibly top that particular encounter? Well, let me just build this up as best as I can. Let me give you a little bit of a desk drum roll, because that's the end of the mod. No boss fight. No big bombastic ending. You get a text screen, you get random ass sound effects, and then what just feels like the icing on top of the cake, Duke Nukem sex noises.
Oh, come back to bed, do. I'm ready for some action now.
So yeah, as of this moment, Borg Nukem is one of my trigger phrases. Anyone who utters it will now be committing a war crime against yours truly, because I will be transported mentally back to those fledgling moments when I was so naive, about to take the dive on this vaguely interesting looking Duke mod, wondering, it can't be that bad. It is. It really is. It's bad. It might have been novel, when it came out originally, but it hasn't aged well. It's aged spectacularly poorly. And you may be wondering why I spent a lot of time doing a relative level-by-level breakdown of Episode 2 and not Episode 1. It's because Episode 1 is incomprehensible. There are just far too many questions I keep asking about those levels. Actually, really come to think of it, it only comes down to one question. Why? Why? Why it be like that? Why? But here's the thing, the answer will never come. So I'm drawing a line here. This far, no further. I am done. And abandon all hope is all I can tell you. Abandon all hope, all ye who enter here. Because depending on what end of Borg Nukem you decide to engage with, you're either going to be staring into the gibbering void of level design madness, or bored to absolute death. Dare I say, Borged to death. In any case, if you find yourself morbidly intrigued by this Duke mod, I say, for the love of Christ, just go play Star Trek Elite Force instead. It's practically the only place you need to look if you're craving a little bit of Starfleet versus Borg action. Really, honestly, forget this even exists. Just consign it to the memory hole of history. We'll speak of this no more. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful long-suffering patrons over on Patreon. I know this has been a little bit more of a gap than usual between video releases, but as most of you may already know, I've become a dad, have certain responsibilities, and those make it a real pain in the ass to get editing and getting the footage that I actually need. So this may be the new normal for me for quite a while to come. So once again, thank you so much for your support and for sticking by me. If you're interested in supporting the channel yourself, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits, maybe you'd like to gain early access to my videos before anyone else, whenever the heck that turns out to be, then feel free to turn your attention to the link on the end screen or the link that's available in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mods you'd like to see me cover in future editions of Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.